We're high above the Blackmore Vale on the top of Oakford Hill in Dorset, and if you look over my shoulder there, you might just be able to see the truck. We spent the night here last night. It's one of my favourite park-ups. It's beautiful. So where are we? We're standing on a track that's part of the Wessex Ridgeway, and the Ridgeway is a route that goes all the way from Norfolk that way, right the way to Lyme Regis that way. It's over 350 miles long, and it's a route that's been in use since at least the Bronze Age, possibly right back as far as the Neolithic. In that time, everything you see behind me there was thick, dense forest. Possibly in the Bronze Age, just starting to get into kind of being cleared for agriculture. At that time, there was no concept of ownership of it. It was only the introduction of agriculture that led to the concept of owning land. But as we walk up the track, we're going to go forward in time. Our next stop is the Iron Age. We've reached the crossroads and we're about to leave the Bronze Age now and enter the Iron Age, the age of the Celts. In front of us here is what's called a dew pond, and this is a hollow or bowl that's been dug into the chalk in order that it could fill up and provide all year round water for animals. Now, as we moved forward in history, obviously farming became more and more important, and that meant that we had to protect our animals. We had to keep predators off of our crops, and that meant we had to clear land, and that meant we sort of had to claim ownership of it. We've arrived in the Celtic era now, in the land of the Tree tribe, and in front of us, this bank that we're about to walk forms the main part of the Ringmore farming settlement, which was a small farming village high up here on the chalk. Now, at this time, it was part of a thriving landscape. About 3 miles that way is Hambledon Hill, which is one of the biggest Iron Age hill forts anywhere in Europe. And about 15 miles behind us is Maiden Castle, which is even bigger. Don't forget Hod Hill as well, next to Hambledon, which I think may even be the biggest. Not sure, let me know in the comments. But anyway, so the fact that we have a tribe called the Tree who lived alongside their neighbours down in Devon and Cornwall, the Dumnonii, I think they were called, tells us that the concept of land ownership was alive and kicking by this point of human history. By this point, most of the forests had been cleared and converted to agriculture. But the fact that there was this network of tribal chiefs and ownership of certain areas had its plus sides, I guess. Protection. If you had a beef with your neighbours, you could go and see the tribal chief, who may possibly even raise an army in your defence. But with that protection, there's a trade-off, isn't there? Your natural born animal right to roam as free as a rabbit has been eroded. You now exist with limited access to the land and the landscape around you. I'm not suggesting that everything about this is a bad thing. As I said, there's a lot of benefits to it, isn't there? But for every step up in security and convenience, there's a step down in terms of your connection to the realities of being a living, breathing animal alive on a planet. Over there behind the earthworks is a piece of ancient pasture woodland. I think that became a thing in the medieval period, although I'm not sure, and if you know better, please do let me know. By the time of the medieval period, things had moved on again, and as I'm going to look for some tinder for a future possible tinder off competition that may appear on the channel, and also I'm always looking for wood, that's where we're headed next. By this period, we've obviously got England, kings, and pretty much every piece of land is owned by someone. This ancient pasture woodland system was a system whereby the locals, the commoners, it was decreed that they were allowed to run their animals through the woodland. Their animals were allowed to forage through the woodland. And as much as that was about keeping the locals happy and alive, there's a certain ecological sense to that as well. If you think about modern permaculture ideas, which involve a lot of woodland, the idea of running animals through is that they're constantly fertilising the ground, which is fantastic. They keep a lot of the horrible undergrowth like brambles. Not that brambles are horrible, I'm sorry, I'm not dissing you brambles, but they can be a bit invasive, let's face it. They keep a lot of that out of the way. And then that leaves humanity free to use the wood. And this is all derelict, really. Back in those days, they would have thinned out the standards. There was a system of what they called waivers, where you let some semi-mature trees grow on to see how they did and see whether they would be the ones that ultimately went on to replace the bigger, older trees, the standards, when you chop them down. But they would have been a lot thinner. They would have pollarded a lot of these trees as well, rather than just let them grow into their natural shape. Let me know what you think about that. It does have certain benefits, but also, you know, it's harnessing a tree and telling it what to do, isn't it? With that in mind as well, this whole woodland is full of hazel coppice. It's all overstood, it's all in a terrible state, and please, National Trust, if you want someone to take it on, contact me and I'll put it into a management system again. But yeah, this hazel, they would have coppiced it every 7 years, so it would have never got very big, and they would have used it for so much. It would have been a source of fuel in charcoal and regular firewood. They would have used it for making hurdles, all sorts of things. A vital part of everyday life was hazel back in them days. Now it's all overstood and derelict. So what do you think about this idea then that at this point in history, pretty much everything was owned, land-wise, but there was this system now in place whereby humanity could have access to it. We give you access to it. You're no longer a free, sovereign individual animal walking around on the planet. We've given you access. Be thankful and grateful. What do you think about that change? Here's some of this overstood hazel I mentioned. Look, that should be cut every 7 years. This probably hasn't been done for over 20 years, I wouldn't have thought. Maybe even as much as 30. A lot of these woodlands went into dereliction after World War II. The nation needed to be rebuilt, and that meant they needed wood quick. So they planted a lot of softwood, which grows very quickly. And all of these old ancient woodlands, all these slow growing hardwoods were left. But anyway, the sun's actually going down now, and I am getting a bit cold. So I think I'm going to have to put the tinder hunt on hold and head up the hill, back to the van, get the burner on and have a cup of tea. So that means heading down there to that road and the age of tarmac. Bye bye Ringmore, and thanks from all of us. It's been a pleasure. If you ever want to come on a holiday and explore beautiful countryside and a lot of ancient history, come to Dorset. But anyway, here we are. We're walking on up a tarmac road. We don't have to worry about wolves. And to be fair, we probably don't have to worry about highwaymen. The systems we have in place have a lot of benefits. But as we walk forward in history, I don't know about you, but I think there's a lot of bad stuff as well. For instance, travelling people, Roma, ethnic travellers, they started to be persecuted and started to be told to move on all the time. That ended up in my lifetime. We've had things like Dale Farm, where they were told they can't even exist on their own bit of land. We've had what happened to the New Age travellers, the Battle of the Bean Field, various acts of Parliament that restricted our freedom to associate and our freedom to roam. Just in these last couple of years, I attended a march to raise the spirit of Crocern, which is the spirit of Dartmoor. And that was as a result of one man who decided that because he'd bought a bit of land and gained ownership to it, ownership, there's that word again, he alone could get the public access removed from it. It had been an area of open access, and he decided it wasn't going to be any more. Thankfully, people rose up, and we did raise the spirit of Crocern, and we won that battle. The Right to Roam movement, keep up that battle every day, trying to defend our access to what has to be considered surely our birthright. We're an animal, aren't we? What are we? Are we separate from all of that? I don't think so. We rely on it, don't we? Every breath I'm taking, every breath that little fella is taking, couldn't exist without it, could I? As we get further back up the hill towards the van, or for the purposes of this conversation, the present moment, we get to like the last 5 years, during which time not only has the British government introduced a law which more or less makes the travelling life a criminal offence. We'll just wait for this car to go by. Land Rover actually. Yeah, so not only did the British government do that, but we also had quite a lengthy period where pretty much everyone in the Western world, the developed world, was told that they couldn't leave their homes. I don't want to go into the ins and outs of that, but that's where we got to. A point where the individual human being was told, and largely acquiesced, to the idea they couldn't even step outside. Yeah, we're just going to cross over the road. Oh, come here. Have a look up there. Isn't that beautiful? So, we have an age now, obviously, with the internet. It's amazing. I can talk to you wherever you are, from my van, or the world's. It's brilliant. So much about modern life is amazing. But, you know, this trade-off, it's there. We're told now by gurus and well-being experts and the National Health Service that we should spend more time in nature. In nature. What's the glaringly obvious thing? We're not separate from it. Ever. We are nature. And this modern world that we live in, and I enjoy as much as you, does its best to separate us from that cold, hard reality, to separate us from ourselves. Here we are then, back at the van, very much back in the now, with Hambledon Hill lying down in the valley below us as the sun sets. Alf's already gone to bed. It's a perfect, balmy, early spring evening. So what are your thoughts? You've listened to me rambling on long enough. What are your thoughts about the fact that as we've journeyed today from a time when we were walking thin tracks through deep forests with wolves and all sorts of danger, all the way through to now, where we're protected from so much of that, and yet so disconnected from reality. We can all see the planet suffering. I think a lot of us are suffering too. I'd be incredibly interested to hear what your thoughts are about where we are, what we're doing, and what we perhaps could be doing. Cheers.